Thanks.
Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Dr. Jean LaCour. And she's a world changer, guys. Like, she has worked with people in Russia, the Middle East, over 40,000 people in the areas of addiction, and helping people understand what it means to be addicted and understand how to interact with people they love who are struggling with addiction. Is that right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Such amazing work and such an amazing legacy. To tell people just a teeny bit more about what you do.
Oh my.
Oh my is right. When your rap sheet in a good way is as long as yours is, then you.
Well, I started out as just a person in recovery, because of my family's alcoholism that I didn't know about, but we have gone on to create trainings to train people to be addiction counselors, to recovery, how to support recovery staff. Again, I've been in 35 nations, but we've got people in 40 to 60 nations now because we're online. So that was the counselor piece. And then we moved into taking professional life coaching, and I created a specialty in addiction recovery because I realized the power, right, of life coaching to move from the past and the pain to tell a new story of possibilities.
Oh, Gene, we're gonna like each other so much. The way I say it is get past the past, get real about the present, and serious about the future.
You got it. So because of COVID, last year, I finally did what I wanted to do my entire life. And that was to move into prevention because I'm a preventionist by certification and licensure. So we started double time with COVID to put together an awareness strategy for adults. We call it Strategic Sobriety Workforce Solutions. And we have an awareness facilitator certification. Takes about 10 hours for people who want to be in their community to just raise the understanding of how serious not tending to certain patterns is, and to understand addiction in layman's language. So we launched that February and March 2021. So I'll
love that. Yes. Well, so what are some patterns people should watch out for? You get out of
Well, how about we just talk about, let me start here.
Sure.
No, really, because I know too many things to go that direction.
Yes.
Say, what did I wish I had known?
What do you wish you had known with your family?
Listeners,
Yeah.
And I love the way you present this, Sarah. You blow me away we're in sync in this. I knew nothing. I just knew that my loved one, my wonderful love of my life, husband, was dying of alcoholism, and no one believed me. No one. And so I love that. What is it? The smart girl syndrome.
Yes.
I came at it from that direction. I came at it from the spiritual, but no one wanted to know. And so I learned that there are professional enablers that don't want to know if that my husband was killing himself and us, because they were doctors, they were faith leaders. He had 600 employees, was president of the Chamber of Commerce. So he did not fit anyone's model. So they would just downplay me, the little wife, be a better wife, etc.
Dr. Jean, if I can intercept just there, you do not come across as a little wife. You are changing the world, and you do not come across as a little wife. And I do want to point that out for our listeners, right? Because many of them have been in situations that they were hoping to get the ear of help and were minimized somehow. And so if I may use you and myself as an example,
please,
to say we've all been there.
Yes. I had the creds to produce, I had the Montessori school, blah, blah, blah. I didn't realize that addiction really is a sickness of silence. Okay? Sickness of silence. And why do I say that? Because of stigma and shame. And no one talked about it. And I did not realize that I was a third generation. My mother, my grandmother, highly trained, educated, smart women, and we each one married a well-to-do, intelligent alcoholic who within a matter of 10, 15 years was in full-blown alcoholism. Did they tell me about it? No, nothing. Because they didn't want me to think ill of them or that. I mean, the shame is so massive. And so for me to find out by somebody giving me a book, and then I went to a treatment program because I was desperate for family members. Because of course my husband had no problem, I was part of the problem, all of that gaslighting. We didn't have the term gaslighting, but it's part of addiction, the way it is, narcissism and domestic violence and so forth. Didn't know these things. I didn't realize that there were archetypes in families, and that as I learned and I shared it little by little with people, my faith community, or all people just lined up, people from Africa and India and Norway, because I thought it was maybe just a Western, maybe even just an American psychological thing. No, it is a classic human melodrama. And it is as familiar in India, in Singapore, and Malaysia, in Canada. It is the life story when addiction takes over. And that's really what blew me away. Were those things that I didn't know as a highly educated person. And
what's the things we don't talk about?
No.
It's the things you don't talk about, and the things that we are trained, even within religious communities, to cover over.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Well, don't talk bad about your father.
We just keep looking up. We don't look down. We certainly don't want to see those things, Yeah. And so I didn't realize that addiction applied to, in the old days, AA was only for alcoholics. They wouldn't even bring in the drug addicts. That had to wait for NA. Then I didn't realize that gambling, I knew there were behaviors that, followed certain behavior, models of lack of control, craving, consequences, continued behaving in this way. But it all works on the brain. And so I had no idea, kind of these definitions now, and I will shift to, what is the American Society of Addiction Medicine? What do they call addiction? Because it helps people,
Yeah, sure. That'd be great.
Okay. They say that it is a brain disorder. They say, right? Pardon me, get it off my printer here. That addiction is a treatable, chronic, medical disorder, disease. Some people won't use the disease word, or disorder, but it is, you get that, it's chronic, it's medical, and it's a disorder. It involves complex interactions among brain circuits, among your genetics, your environment, and an individual's life experience. So those are those words. And if anyone goes to my website, iCare, aware, I-C-A-R-E, iCare-aware.org, I have a whole section so people understand different definitions, different theories of addiction, and then how all the different recovery models. So you don't have to remember these complex things, but I want to explain one thing about the brain, because it's very hard for people to understand the brain disease. If you can understand, though, that in the brain, there is a pleasure center and a pain center. We have a whole reward circuit. And by golly, if you've ever liked chocolate and you eat more and more, it's touching your brain, that pleasure center, or all the other things we do, whether it's eating potato chips or it's, too much internet. There's something that gets overused and overworked. And so you do more and more until what brought you pleasure now brings you pain, because your dopamine has been depleted. All these brains.
Yes. So if you love Oreo cookies, okay, And at one point, we're 3 years old, right? One Oreo cookie is great. But then we need 2 Oreo cookies to get the same dopamine hit.
Yes.
3 glasses of wine or whatever else it is. Is that right?
You got it. Mm-hmm. The other trick it plays in your brain is euphoric recall. It messes with your memory circuits because, pain is one of the best ways to learn, the old hot stove. Woo, kids will either, you smack that hand, because you love them. You go, no, you're not going to touch the iron, and they get it, it's, but for an addict or for someone moving in that process along that progression, guess what? You remember the high, you remember the power, you remember, it was so soothing when I ate that whole gallon of ice cream, because now you've moved on a further step down.
Can you talk about the progression of addiction?
I will.
Yes, yeah.
And the other thing you want to finish the brain on this, your brain is made to keep you alive. You will survive. And you know that there's a part of your brain back here, your animal brain, reptilian brain, that if you're asleep, you don't have to control your heart rate, your breathing. This is automatic. And it's what? It's for survival, right? Fight or flight. And your body has mechanisms that you do not control. The 3 survival ways, or what your brain focuses on, for survival, is food. Talk about food addiction, the hardest to break. Sex. As humans, we have to procreate as a race. Okay. Sexual addiction is extremely difficult, to address. And the third is safety. And you're saying safety? Well, guess what?
Oh, that's fascinating. Yes, a safety addiction. Oh, okay, yes. Okay. Do tell more. I'm leaning in. I'm so excited.
You know what that alcohol represents to your whole system? Safety. It's taking it out of a place. I shoot up that, or I take that oxy. I'm not feeling any pain or stress anymore. And the brain back here, not the thinking brain, registers that will keep Jean safe. Okay. So she's not, and everything is a twist, right? Everything is a perversion of your body trying to keep you safe. So I use the Oreos because we've all experienced something where we lost control.
Yeah.
Or we craved it, but somehow we managed it. But if you can imagine just extending that in terms of your behaviors, that's really what addiction is: loss of control, consequences, craving, and doing things you don't want to do anymore. So here's this progression. The progression begins with chemical pleasure.
Okay.
We love it. Okay. We're allowed to do that. We're not about, you have to be, totally abstinent. You're an adult, and in our culture, most cultures, we believe that adults can make these decisions, from their own values, from their own responsibility, what they choose. We're talking about here, it's your values that determine your choices about chemical pleasure. And it's tied to graduations and weddings and celebrations.
I want to slow you down just a second. Your values determine the choices you make about your chemical pleasure. That's a big thing. I didn't want to skip over that for anybody. Okay. So we have there's an expectation of champagne maybe at a wedding. Right? Okay. Now progress. Keep progress on your talk of progression. Yes.
All of us if we know the group there, we know that Betty over there is likely, if somebody didn't handle this, she's likely to go way beyond the celebration, right? And it's a concern. But 1 out of 10 people move to that.
But 1 out of 10 move into addiction?
Yes.
Okay.
But there's a progression, as I said. The second, stage we call chemical coping.
Yeah.
Chemical coping. So when you're stressed, when your circumstances, and all types of issues you talk about, we have to cope some way. And that food, that alcohol, that porn, that people pleasing, that rescuing, all of those behaviors that are really become toxic behaviors and maladaptive, they're the things that help relieve that stress initially. Okay. How many times did I say, oh, the kids, we can talk about mommy juice. Oh my gosh. And here during the pandemic,
it's gotten really bad.
There's a 262% increase in 1 year from March to March, okay, in alcohol sales. We know that 250 people die every day, Sarah, from alcohol misuse through violence, through accidents, through all the diseases. Alcohol is so toxic. People don't realize that. Okay?
Well, society gives you permission, right? It's very fun to say, or fun, but it's very acceptable. If I posted a Facebook meme, 10 a.m., time for mommy juice, try to get through homeschooling, like that's very socially acceptable. And
there's a whole sober curious, sobriety movement, and I'll mention that a little bit later on, because millennials are a lot smarter than the boomers, or the others in there, that Gen Z or whatever, Gen X, because they're thinking, they're watching, they're seeing. But there are businesses that, they're through COVID, they're sending out cases of wine to their managers. They're having, business oriented drinking without taking any responsibility. So that coping, when we really deal about coping, we go in the healing process or in the learning or the coaching, we go right to emotional intelligence.
Right.
Because people don't know what they feel. Okay? They don't know how to communicate what they feel, much less know what you're feeling, or how, or to understand this relational dynamic. So we have to begin with, what are you feeling? Terror, anxiety. My gosh, I've got this much work and this much time. And, there's so many problems that COVID has speeded up and intensified in the addiction process, right? And so we quickly have to get to, what are you feeling? And most people can't even name their feelings. Addicts know, I'm mad, I'm sad, I'm glad. That's it. They very rarely feel glad, but that glad, that kind of sad goes to rage and anger so quickly because they don't know how to cope. And that makes you feel a little more powerful. And so
I want to point that out. Yes. Because when we talk about anger, especially young people, right, is we prevent future alcoholics, right?
Yeah.
Angry and yes. Anger is a much more powerful feeling than sadness.
Yes. So women feel sad. We have permission to cry. And so I'm going to tell you, for years, I would tell you about how much my husband, and, he's intelligent, but he's drinking this much vodka and nobody knows but me. You would hear that over and over and hoping somebody feels sorry and save me from it. But men, are you kidding? They feel anger. They don't have the permission. And it's all this pain and trauma they're carrying, of course, that has to be dealt with. But that's where that power up, I'm not going to go to there. I'm going to remember what I do hate, and it's women, or it's my mother, or it's my father. Oh, the father issues worldwide, or they drive a lot of high risk behavior. And I only cope through anger. And then my use of whatever it is, okay, remember, it's chemical pleasure, to chemical coping. I need that. To now, the third stage is chemical bondage. Bondage, and that is addiction. Okay, that is when the control is gone. That's when the cravings set in, the loss of control. It's all there, and consequences are mounting up. And the brain, remember the brain, it's keeping you safe with that alcohol, with that porn, with that gambling, and mixing it all together. And that oxy, it's going, Okay. Now, that's working against you. And that's where the denial comes. And I love what you said about what your brain does. You blew me away with that, with those talks, you know. Your brain is working against you. So add this in there. So that's when it's time to save a life. That might be detox. It may be, you know, the Narcan, you know, to keep somebody alive who's now dying from an overdose of oxy or opiates. But you have to stop somebody. And if they can get in treatment, and there are very few treatment beds or even less treatment beds because of what? Quarantine? Isolation? I mean, it's the exact wrong time, you know? And so you have to stabilize someone so they won't die. And you're working in such a way with a short time for some kind of recognition, so there can be some kind of ownership. Maybe I do have a problem.
Now, I want to go back. So stabilize to keep them safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Survive. Yeah.
And then the goal is for them to have some type of light bulb come on, that they say there's something that needs to change. Yeah. And I do want to ask you this, because I know there can be such a push and pull of where do I start and where do they begin? What is my problem? What is their problem?
Okay. Well, let me go right over here to the end, because, you know, the treatment that people need, it is so amazing. People must have belonging, the attachment. They need to know how to connect. Many people, they don't even learn these things until their addictive behaviors have taken them to this level. And since the 30s, after the repeal of prohibition, that's when AA was birthed, because people needed help. And it is amazing. You need that process that has people in it, so you can reattach and have role models that people hope that are a step beyond you. So many people never get into treatment because it doesn't exist. And now with COVID, there's so many things online in the rooms, and so many resources that I have on our iCare website. And then the addict learns that it's not out there, it's in here. But the key many times to people getting into treatment is for the family member who is the chief enabler, okay? Because every addiction has an enabler. You must have, because addiction is debilitating. And so you must find someone. It gets down to food, clothing, shelter. Can I borrow your car? Hey, baby, all the come-ons that you understand with narcissism, they're rampant in addiction, because it's now become all about my survival, and I will do and learn and say whatever it takes to get one enabler, you know, or the next one or the next one. But the chief one, especially if you're close in and you have that no muscle and you've done your work, as you say, there's a time to know about it and a time to do your work, so that you know how to give that loved one, that friend, the opportunity, okay, to face some reality. And that's where, and it's not done with hatred or anger or rage, and it comes with learning. I have to take care of myself first. Again, the self-care is fine, but if you don't understand the strategy that addict cannot move away from your help. And so they will do everything to manipulate you. But when you understand this is the only way they will get help, if there's a consequence. So it can be a job loss, the divorce, or the DUI and jail time. You know, there's a lot of harsh realities, but people can stop sooner rather than later. But it's that key enabler, which has to say, as my husband used to say when he would talk to people later, I mean, he was an alcoholic from 15 to 50, right? And he would say, until Jean stood her ground, stood in one place and said, this is my life. You can do what you're going to do with your life. It will not be in our home. And when our youngest child's out of high school, it's over. Okay. I will stay just a few months longer. Boom. And I knew it from the gut. And so when you know it in your gut, then take a lot of words. Before you nagged and begged and proved you were giving pamphlets, right? You've done anything. But when it comes in here, when that steel comes into your spine, when your gut says, I am worth more. I have a life. I have values. I have responsibilities. I have children to support. I'm a complete person here who's growing up, and you will not be a part of this. They know. Instinctively, they know. I mean, he said nothing when I said that to him. I'd just come back from Russia, and I had seen who I was in light of a dying nation of alcoholics. And I saw what I brought there in a 3-day training to those professionals and non-professionals. And it's like, what am I doing? I'm still living it here, and he knew it was over. But I did not know for 2 years that he was struggling and going to AA, relapsing because he was terrified to lose his family. But I didn't get any of that information until right before our son graduated, and it was Thanksgiving, and he shared how thankful he was to be in recovery. Almost fell out of the chair. Do you see how he says, once you stood your ground, then my world of chaos, you became a center point, the steel in your backbone. Do you understand? It's amazing because we feel weak. We feel like we're not, all that stuff. But when you know, just like you say, connect with yourself, know yourself, protect yourself, and see the possibilities of a life without chaos and death and destruction. They know it, and they'll either move on or they will begin their recovery. And
it feels counterintuitive, right? Because what we think is, I need to save you.
Me to do love and care and understand.
Oh, I'm so sorry you had a bad childhood. So here, let me cover over the lies. Yeah. So our children can also have a bad childhood, right? I mean, I hate to say it that way, but that's what ends up happening, right?
Yes. You got it.
Thank you.
Listen, trauma is there. And that leads us into this thing called recovery.
Yeah.
And, our new program is called Strategic Sobriety Workforce Solutions. Because if we just called it recovery awareness, people do this. Oh, it's not about me. I'm not, unless people are really at a core level afraid of addiction.
Yes. Whoa. Afraid of addiction. Okay. I really think that's important. Okay. Because people are not afraid. We have that idea in our head. It won't happen to me. It won't happen to me. Right.
Yeah. I'm saying this is at professional levels. For medical doctors didn't handle it. Psychotherapists didn't, even all of my addiction specialty is certified by the International Coach Federation. Some of your listeners may be aware of that you were trained for years up until recently. You don't handle mental illness, right? You don't handle trauma, and you certainly don't handle addiction. And so it's more of that, get this, Sarah, we look up here. Everybody wants a better life and success and future. We don't look at that. But yet, I was at a meeting of all kinds of international coach training organizations. It's not a lot. They're not a lot of us. And do you know, when I spoke just briefly, I did a sponsor at a table. Do you know that during the next 2 days, how many of those people who run coach training organizations at a high level came to me privately, looked around and said, my brother, my son, my father, I was in jail, in college for selling heroin. It's not on my resume. Yeah, but see, everybody was dying to verbalize their story. But they had been trained, we don't deal with this. And there were some visionaries who in the coaching profession said, we're going to help you. Because people need it. And so people who want to talk about it, because when you talk to your clients, and if you don't, your question, what is the problem? And if
what problem are you trying to solve? That's going to be my next book, right? And that has changed everything for my coaching clients, because
alcoholic husband. No, well, okay. Right. What else? What else is
yes. Well, yeah. What's your problem? Is this your problem to solve? That's the first question. What problem are you trying to solve? Maybe it's the chaos in your life.
Yes.
Well, my husband's causing the chaos. Well, is it your problem to solve? You can solve not having a life of chaos.
Yes.
You cannot change. You cannot take on your husband's choices.
Yes, and his addiction. See how I love the way we think together, because it's not clear. It's not clear. Okay,
it's not clear.
So when you get that, it's pretty amazing. So with this strategic sobriety awareness, when how we tie it back to recovery, is that lo and behold, people don't know how to cope, right? They went from pleasure, which was all acceptable. They went to coping. The coping was what, brought them into bondage, because they had no stop and go, because the brain had been tricked and it believed it was helping you survive, at a high level. The front of the brain is cut off, And so you don't begin with a whole lot of facts and training for people fresh in recovery, but you're doing the feelings, you're doing some of the values, and you're building on that, what can I say, understanding that there is maturity. And anyone who's been around recovery or a counselor, you'll recognize this, that when a person stops using, it won't be long that you realize that 42-year-old man or woman is acting like a 14-year-old. The emotional maturity stops when addiction sets in. Why? The teenage brain, the adult brain, it doesn't really quit forming until about 26. Mm-hmm. And if you can get across to anyone and to your children, what you do between, age 15 and 14 or 15, and age 25 will set your life. Because addiction does, it destroys that ability to learn naturally and normally, and the emotional growth that you need to go through during teenage years, because it is a tumultuous time. But that's when you learn, right? That's when you're in your peer group. But if you're gravitating to that peer group that's always drinking, always, high, you don't realize that you have just done a downgrade on your future and on your brain. You can get it back, but why give it up? Okay, so
I want everyone to hear what you said, because the rite of passage, right? And it becoming a rite of passage, I don't think parents are recognizing how damaging that can be. And I want to say your words back to you, just to make sure everyone heard them, to say that what you do between 14 and 26 sets the tone the rest of your life, and it prevents learning.
And your brain, yes.
I wonder what the economic cost, because people think in terms of economics, of college binge drinking would be. Like, if they can't learn.
I know.
That's costing businesses, and when these people are 40 years old, correct?
And I did not script you to say that. Okay. That's the deduction of a thinking person.
Yes.
Because, addiction costs the U.S. economy $740 billion a year.
I believe you.
740, okay. And businesses bear the brunt of that. How? Higher taxes, higher healthcare, lost productivity, ID theft, the human cost of their employees sitting there, and they've had these fights, these terrible homes, when they come out and there's statistics on how low functioning the enabler is, or a family member is. Yeah. I've had women say, I smile all day and my heart is broken. I'm not in the chair. I'm there wondering what's happening at home, what's happening to the credit card, what's happening with all of those risks that begin to happen in active addiction. So it is a business problem. It's a performance problem. And because of COVID, the stigma, is taking a break. When you read that in the last 12 months, 75,000 Americans have died of an overdose. I grew up in a town of 30,000 people, St. Augustine, Florida. Okay. So I know now it's probably, 70,000, but I have a picture. Do you have a town that that's about 35? 75,000, and many in their prime, as youth, as young people, as productive people that are no longer contributing. That's 1 year. Okay. These are startling. These are drastic statistics. And business is sending everyone home. The isolation has increased, right? The coping. I don't know about you, but many times when I'm calling, it's so funny. It's not funny. My daughter has 3 children that are right there underfoot, but at least they were elementary. She's supervising. She's an international HR professional in the pharmaceutical industry. She said, Mom, I have people, women that have 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds underfoot while they're trying to,
It's maddening. And
trying the background. And I just say, I said, oh, God bless you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad, that you can be there with your baby. But I'm so aware of the difficulty. Please don't apologize to me.
Yeah.
You're the hero. People don't get it.
And the guilt, like I'm ignoring my child, but I have to pay for my child.
All of that. And so and women have lost more jobs,
yes.
During COVID, and especially professional women, because you're on a track, and as my daughter used to say, people somehow miss the fact that why there are not more women CEOs or at the board level. She said, I could be there in a heartbeat. She's worked for some of I cannot say that, but the most prestigious international companies in the world. In Asia and Germany, the US. But I had little kids, even though I had a nanny and I was gone, during the nanny, during that work. But she said, you can't do that and go to that level. And it's not a discrimination, it's a choice. Most of the women, many women I know, they end here, or they're more mature women and they have a chance. But if you're raising, the next generation, and
cost benefit analysis.
These are and if you understand attachment and authenticity, you have to be with your child and have eye contact.
Yeah.
So those are the issues when we get over here to this recovery. It's dealing with that immaturity, and through the processes that we take people through in recovery, really from AA on to, if you have a sponsor, you're working with a more sophisticated brain who's talking to you about in that personal way, who cares about you, but holds you accountable. And you can make amazing growth in, a couple of years. You're still king baby, as we like to say. You're still
king baby. Oh my gosh. I have that analogy in my coaching program. And I say it's either a baby in a high chair or a king on his throne. Oh man, give me what I want. Right? Like, that is a king baby. I'm going to combine them now.
I know. And so you can see how all this works together. Now that you're stabilized, these people do relapse or come back. But we talk about a low bottom or a high bottom, or all of these terminology that when you get to start analyzing kind of these slogans from AA, is that cheesy? No, let go and let God. But my gosh, it calms the nervous system one day at a time, one step at a time. It's so calming to put truth in there and give someone, drop the rock. You're drowning, you're treading water, but drop the rock, and it'll be easier. We can get you in the boat. All of these kind of colloquial, statements, that they save lives. And so I just want to put out there, as that person in addiction is changing, and you don't have to be that angry, scary, freaked out adult there, but you need to be able to say to your children, like I did with mine. They were in middle school, which again, I got advice. How do I, because you get terrified once you realize what you've enabled in front of your children and role modeled. And she said, start talking to them about your grandfather and grandmother, your mother and father, your blah, blah. Before my mother divorced her alcoholic wealthy, and then in time married my father. So I was not raised in it. She said, begin to show them that uncle and this uncle. She knew the extended family. And begin just to talk to them, matter-of-factly in what you've learned. Mm-hmm. But when I saw my daughter getting the orange juice for her father because he had such a bad tooth, I freaked out. I mean, I just went in the laundry room and went, what have I done? And so I didn't spend a lot of time in Al-Anon, but the few things I learned there, I learned it in other ways and at the treatment center and professionally. She said, she will begin to role model your behavior, I promise you. So, help role model. I know you're clinically depressed. Clinical depression always looks down. So daddy will have some of these problems, but the alcohol makes it worse because it makes the nervous system go to sleep. And that's what his brain wants him to feel better, but it really, in the end, it will be a terrible thing for him to feel better with alcohol. And it's like, oh, Mom, I didn't know that, But see, they were at that age. It didn't make it any easier. And if, like some of your listeners, I was so good at enabling and being the hero and being the la, 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 that my children actually did not see never. They never saw the consequences in his behavior because he's a lovely, kind, intelligent human being who adored his children. And I ran interference. I would cover that, like when he fell over, or, when he didn't show up at the camping trip, and I'd gone ahead and said, and so, oh, honey, he has to work. And then I'd go out, beat a tree, And so when it came time to say, this is the deal, they couldn't tie it really to anything. They'd go, well, Mom, that's true of Uncle. We've seen that at Thanksgiving, or we've seen this one or that one. And because there was a lot of wealth involved, the yachts and the Porsches but they could see out of control behavior. They could see it in the grandfather or grandparent level. They're not fools, but they didn't have anything to tie it to because it was from chemical pleasure to crazy drunken behavior, right? And then here I'm telling them that their dad is like that. So it was very cool. And I had to say, I didn't want you to see what we need to look at now. And so it was a process of conversations. But, when you've got little ones, you can handle it another way at a young child.
I love pointing out people who aren't their father. Like that's definitely do not start with that, because they have such resistance as they should and protecting that. Dr. Jean, thank you so much. So tell people about your website and where they can, I Care Aware. Yep. Was one that you mentioned, but then you have others as well. I Care Aware,
ICARE-aware. And that.org, we're a nonprofit, the International Center for Addiction and Recovery Education. But what we're excited about is we're launching the spring of 2021. It's a sort of certification coaches, counselors, therapists, HR professionals, wellness. We've got nurses, healthcare, come in to learn how to do an awareness lunch and learn in the community, at Rotary, at businesses, to present some of the things I've shown you today in a way that's engaging. And it's like, you know, because people don't know what they don't know. And all of that is happening. That website is addictionawarenessnow.com, addictionawarenessnow.com. And if you go there, you can download and the addiction curve, which is the look and feel of addiction. And you will see how people, when they're starting out, what are the behaviors, you know, that pleasure to coping and sliding down into that trough of addiction, and then coming out the other side into recovery. So you will have behaviors and attitudes and words that you can track with your loved one, but it's at addictionawarenessnow.com, which is part of our whole strategic sobriety program, part of iCare. And we'll have a test you can take, an assessment. Where am I on this whole addiction awareness process? So if there's anything I can do, really, Sarah, to help you or to help your listeners, it takes all of us.
It takes all of us. It takes all of us. Well, Dr. Jean, we're going to have you back on, because that was such a good conversation anyway. But thank you for helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.